It feels like everything is happening at a distance. People talk, things move, time passes, and you're there for all of it, but none of it quite reaches you. It's like you're watching life through a pane you can't touch. You hear the words, you see the expressions, you understand what's being said, and still, something doesn't connect. Inside this feeling, there isn't panic, there isn't sadness in the usual sense. There's a flatness that sits quietly in your chest, a sense of being unplugged. You don't feel empty, you feel muted, like the volume on your inner world has been turned down without your permission. Your body notices this before your mind does. Sensations feel distant, touch registers late or barely at all. You're aware of yourself, but not fully inside yourself. Your movements feel automatic, like your body knows what to do even when you don't feel present in it. You're here, but slightly behind yourself. There's a strange calm in this feeling, and it's unsettling. Nothing hurts sharply enough to demand attention. Nothing feels urgent enough to pull you back in. You don't feel distressed. You just feel separate. From people, from moments, from your own reactions. You notice how emotions arrive dulled. Something that should make you laugh passes with a nod. Something that should upset you barely stirs. You recognize what you're supposed to feel, but the feeling itself doesn't show up. Or it shows up thin, like it's already on its way out. Inside this disconnection, time stretches oddly. Minutes pass without weight. You do things and later realize they didn't really land. Conversations end and you can't quite remember being in them. Not because you weren't paying attention, but because nothing attached, nothing anchored. There's also a quiet loneliness here, but it's not about other people leaving. It's about you not arriving. You can be surrounded and still feel removed. You can be alone and feel no different. The gap isn't between you and others, it's between you and everything. This feeling doesn't announce itself as a problem. It just exists, neutral, persistent, like a thin layer between you and your life. You're functioning, you're capable, you're here, and yet something essential feels out of reach. This is what it's like to be disconnected, before you try to name it. It changes how you relate to people first. You're still around them, you still show up, you still answer when spoken to. But there's a gap between you and the interaction that you can't seem to close. You listen, but you don't lean in. You respond, but you don't feel involved. Conversations move forward without pulling you with them. You're present, but not participating in the way you used to. You start simplifying yourself. You give shorter answers. You share less detail. Not because you're hiding anything, but because it feels unnecessary to offer more when nothing seems to connect. You let moments pass without reaching into them. You stop correcting misunderstandings. You stop clarifying how you feel. It feels easier to stay neutral than to try to bridge a distance that keeps reappearing. This disconnection also turns inward. You notice how rarely you check in with yourself. Not in an intentional way. It just doesn't occur to you. You move from task to task without asking how any of it feels. Decisions get made based on what's practical, not what resonates. You function well enough, but without reference to yourself as part of the process. You become efficient. You handle things. You keep life running. From the outside, it might look like stability. Inside, it feels like autopilot. You're doing what needs to be done, but you're not arriving in any of it. Even moments that should slow you down don't quite land. Rest doesn't restore. Activity doesn't engage. Everything sits at the same level. This feeling makes you pull back without leaving. You don't disappear from relationships. You stay reachable. But you stop reaching first. You stop initiating depth. You keep things manageable, light, surface level. Not because you don't care about people, but because connection feels like something that happens somewhere else now, not where you are. It also affects how you speak about yourself. When asked how you're doing, you answer accurately but vaguely. Fine, okay, busy. You're not lying. You just don't have access to anything more specific. The details feel scattered, hard to gather, so you leave them where they are. None of this feels dramatic or deliberate. It feels like adaptation, like this is how you move through the world when you're disconnected from people, from yourself, from everything. You keep going, you stay functional, and quietly, you organize your life around not meeting contact to get through the day. It costs you a sense of continuity. Life starts to feel like a series of separate moments instead of something that flows. You move from one thing to the next, but they don't build on each other. Experiences don't stack, they reset. You finish something and it doesn't echo. You begin something new and it doesn't feel connected to what came before. It costs you meaning in small ways, not purpose in a big dramatic sense, but the quiet feeling that what you're doing matters to you. You still care about outcomes, you still meet responsibilities, but the emotional weight is gone. Things feel interchangeable, days blur, achievements don't land. Setbacks don't sink in either. Everything stays at the same distance. It costs you intimacy. With others, yes, but also with yourself. You stop feeling like you're inhabiting your own life from the inside. You watch yourself function. You notice yourself responding. But you don't feel involved in the way you once did. It's like living slightly outside your own skin, close enough to observe, too far to feel held by it. It costs you trust in your reactions. When you don't feel much, it becomes hard to know what matters. You question whether your responses are real or just habitual. You wonder if you're missing something important, or if this is simply how things are now. That uncertainty lingers, not loudly, just enough to unsettle you. It costs you energy in a quiet, draining way. Staying disconnected takes effort. Even numbness requires maintenance. You have to keep moving, keep responding, keep things running without the fuel that usually comes from engagement. You don't collapse from it, you endure. But endurance without connection slowly wears you down. It costs you joy, but also grief. You don't feel the highs, but you don't fully feel the lows either. Everything evens out. That might sound manageable, even peaceful. But over time, the absence of contrast makes life feel flat, like you're living in a narrow emotional range that never quite opens. It also costs you the sense of being touched by your own life. Moments happen, but they don't leave marks. You're present for them, but they don't stay with you. And carrying that day after day creates a quiet exhaustion. Not because life is too heavy, but because nothing feels like it's truly reaching you anymore. Right now, you're still disconnected. That hasn't changed. You don't suddenly feel closer to people. You don't feel more present inside yourself. The distance is still there. But something about how you're standing in it is different. You're not fighting it in the same way. You're not trying to push through it or explain it away. You're noticing it as part of your current reality, not as a personal failure. You're aware now of how much effort you've been using just to stay functional, how much energy goes into moving through life without contact. That awareness doesn't reconnect you, but it slows you down. It lets you stop pretending that this state is effortless or neutral. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're responding to something real. Your body feels steadier here, not alive, not numb either, just steadier. You're not bracing as hard. You're not forcing reactions. You're allowing yourself to exist without demanding that something be different right now. That doesn't solve the distance, but it removes some of the strain of constantly trying to cross it. You might notice small moments where something almost reaches you. A sound, a thought, a brief sensation. They don't last. They don't pull you fully back in. But you notice them without grabbing, without judging. That's new. You're not chasing connection anymore. You're letting it come as close as it can, even if it stops short. There's a quiet honesty in this place. You're not telling yourself that you're fine when you're not. You're not dramatizing it either. You're simply acknowledging that right now you feel separate from people, from yourself, from the flow of things. And that acknowledgement brings a small amount of grounding. You don't need to decide what this means. You don't need to diagnose it or turn it into a story. You don't need to plan your way out of it. This moment isn't about resolution. It's about staying present with your experience, without disappearing into distraction or self-judgment. You're still functioning. You're still capable. You're still here. Even in this disconnected state, you exist. You notice. You carry yourself through the day. That matters more than it feels like right now. This is where you are now, still remembering, still carrying, still here.